Long-term supply agreement, presented by a warning light company, outlines a proposed framework for a supply relationship that is heavily skewed in favor of the supplier's interests and imposes significant, one-sided obligations on the customer. A contract of this nature, which governs a critical business function like supply chain procurement, should be a balanced document mutually negotiated by both parties. It is highly unusual and potentially detrimental for a customer to simply concur with a supplier's own terms and conditions without rigorous scrutiny and pushback. The agreement locks the customer into a multi-year commitment with pricing that, while initially fixed, can be adjusted semi-annually by the supplier based on its own assessment of raw material costs, with the customer having only a right to negotiate in good faith rather than a firm cap. The payment terms are particularly onerous, penalizing the customer with a reversion to higher, standard pricing for any late payment, and implementing a three-strikes policy that voids favorable pricing for an entire business unit for 30 days per infraction, ultimately leading to potential termination. The document restricts the customer's freedom to use the products, prohibiting international shipment or use without the supplier's consent, and forbidding the resale of products individually. It also demands extensive marketing concessions from the customer, including featuring the supplier's products at trade shows and in promotional materials, listing them as a default in specification software, and even requiring the customer to annually visit its own business units with the supplier to confirm compliance. Furthermore, the supplier grants itself broad unilateral rights, such as the ability to remove products from the agreement with relatively short notice, while the customer is bound by stricter termination clauses, including one that allows termination if the customer fails to increase its business by a specific percentage. The preferred supplier clause, while common, is drafted to heavily favor the supplier's right to match competitors' offers. In essence, this is not a neutral agreement, but an instrument designed to maximize supplier control and minimize customer flexibility. Accepting such a document as is would cede substantial operational and financial leverage to the supplier. A prudent customer would insist on a complete redraft on its own terms, or, at a minimum, undertake significant negotiations to rebalance the obligations, risks, and rights outlined herein to reflect a more equitable partnership. Accepting this agreement as drafted would financially handcuff the customer to the supplier, creating significant risk and potential for escalated costs. The most immediate danger lies in the clauses governing product discontinuation and the mandated sales growth. If the supplier unilaterally decides to discontinue a product critical to the customer's production line, citing something as vague as a raw material cost increase or availability issue, the customer is left with a mere 60 to 90 days to find an alternative. This sudden forced requalification of a new component from a different supplier is not a simple swap. It incurs massive hidden costs. The customer would face substantial engineering man-hours, potential tooling changes, new validation and testing protocols, and the risk of production line delays or shutdowns. These unplanned expenses could easily dwarf any initial savings promised by this agreement. Furthermore, the requirement to increase business with the supplier by 3% annually under threat of termination is a profoundly one-sided and dangerous term. It forces the customer's hand commercially. Market conditions fluctuate, a customer's own sales might decline, or a specific product line might become obsolete. This clause ignores those realities, effectively punishing the customer for market forces beyond its control. Even more damaging is the opportunity cost it creates. By contractually obligating itself to grow business with this specific supplier, the customer is implicitly agreeing to divert business away from other, potentially more innovative or cost-effective competitors. If a rival supplier emerges with a higher quality product, a more reliable delivery system, or a significantly lower price, the customer is financially discouraged from taking full advantage. This stifles competition and eliminates the customer's primary lever for negotiating better terms in the future. The agreement doesn't just lock in current prices, it attempts to lock in market share for the supplier, ensuring the customer cannot pivot to better options without facing a contractual penalty. This loss of procurement flexibility is perhaps the greatest long-term financial implication, as it sacrifices the customer's future competitiveness for the sake of a present-day agreement that overwhelmingly benefits the supplier.